Welcome to my channel and welcome to this video. My name is Wa, and in my last video I was discussing symptoms of depression as well as common misconceptions in regards to people dealing with depression. I wanted to make this video about alleviating depression, what I've seen in my journey so far. The first video that I had uploaded when I was speaking about um, the symptoms as well as common misconceptions. Of course, I was speaking from my experience. So again, this video is in reference to my experience. So with that being said, when people are dealing with depression, oftentimes they have this part of themselves that existed before the event that made them upset, depressed, or traumatized. And then they have the person that they feel like they are now, which is the person that is dealing with the trauma, pain, devastation, shock, disappointment, or all of the above. And so there's a split in this person's identity because now they're relating to their life from two aspects: who they used to be and then who they feel like they are in the present moment. What I noticed is that when oh yes, most important, when people are depressed, which I discussed in the previous video, they don't feel motivated to do the things that they were passionate about before, the things that made them happy, because they don't feel like themselves. They feel like a different person. They're technically not really themselves anymore because they are the person that experienced XYZ, which changed their feeling, which changed their energy, which changed their vibration, which changed their frequency, which changed their mindset. So they are projecting, feeling, radiating a whole different energy frequency, and that can change even the way that they look in their eyes, the way that they see themselves, and even their physical appearance. So one of the things that can alleviate this type of scenario, I have noticed, is that if the person has the ability to look at themselves doing things that used to motivate them in the past. So like if they're able to see their previous artwork that they used to do, and they might not be able to look at it at first. They might not be able to look at it at first. At first, it'll be kind of like an eyesore because, again, when somebody is depressed, they are constantly thinking about how messed up it was that they experienced XYZ. And because they are responsible, they know that they're responsible for their journey, they feel upset. And a lot of times people are always like, don't blame yourself, don't blame yourself. But it's really not about self-blame. It's about how they feel about what happened to them and their inability to stop that from happening. So they're not trying to take responsibility for the other, variables that have to do with other people related to the event, but just for their own ability as a creator of their own reality. So I want to say that. And of course, this constant critical analysis of self, affects the confidence, affects the mindset, affects, the thoughts that the person has, their inner conversations with themselves become less and less positive and more negative. I don't think that people mean to, become overly judgmental of themselves. But again, their whole perception of self becomes skewed from the lens of the trauma. They're looking at themselves from the lens of the trauma now. So they're seeing like they're just putting on the trauma glasses. They have the trauma glasses, the trauma lens on. And so it can be hard sometimes for them to look at that other version of themselves, to look at themselves in the past, enjoying the things that they used to be passionate about, like their hobbies and activities. Excuse me. So, but it is something that is very alleviating little by little, the more and more that they persist in doing it. For example, at first I wasn't able to look at anything that any of my previous artwork and projects that used to bring me a lot of joy. I wasn't able to look at it because I didn't feel inspired to do so, because I was too focused on the situation, excuse me, that I was upset about. But the more and more that I did look at my artwork and the things that I used to be passionate about prior to the event, I would feel more better, because that's just basically putting, positive energy back into the self. Depression is, just that constant negative energy flowing into the self from focusing on the event that made the person feel different in the first place. So when the person begins to focus on that other part of their self that didn't experience the negative event, this becomes an alleviating factor for the depression, because instead of them being focused on their depressed self, the self that feels different, the self that experienced the pain and the trauma, they begin to focus. They're directing their attention on their self that didn't experience that. And then they start to feel, eventually, the more and more and more, and the more and more attention that they put on that part of themselves, then they start to feel better, because then they are putting admiration and love towards themselves indirectly by, or directly, by looking at, that other part of themselves that's really them, but they still feel different because of the split of, person, part of self that didn't experience that, and then the self that did. So it's alleviating for a person that is experiencing depression to look at themselves, the self before, that had not experienced whatever event that caused them trauma, pain, sadness, or depression, and to look at that other version of themselves from a space of admiration. So that's why I said looking at previous artwork, or previous activities, previous scenarios and situations that brought the person joy and happiness and fun prior to the incident. Like I said in the beginning, the person can't really do it for an extended period of time because they're really hurt. And, that's the way depression works. But the more and more that the person will persist in putting energy towards that part of themselves that was free from the trauma, that felt really, really good and happy, then that's all energy that they're putting into themselves, all positive energy, because they're looking at themselves, remembering and feeling admiration and feeling happiness and good energy. So I wanted to just make a quick video talking about that, because a lot of times, it can really be that simple, but it's a process. I've seen myself, and I've seen other people, or another person that I'm close with, not be able to look at that other version of themselves at all, you know. But then as time went on, they're able to look at things associated with themselves and things that they used to do, you know, and making more and more and more and more progress. And even, for myself, I was not able to look, you know, or listen or whatever. But now, I'm able to. And it's very alleviating because you're just putting positive energy into yourself, or the person is putting positive energy into themselves, which is the antidote to depression, because the depression energy is them, more so adapting a mindset where they're looking at themselves through the pain of the experience and just the disappointment of the experience. So looking at themselves, the other part of themselves that didn't experience the experience at all, who they truly love and admire, it just, brings back the person to a more holistic feeling within themselves, a more holistic feeling of self-love. Because, people love themselves, period. But, the trauma that some people experience can make them feel like they don't love something, because of course they don't love the trauma. So it's just a very, multifaceted thing. But I did want to quickly share how I've been able to alleviate um, depression, which is by looking at previous things that I've done that were passions of mine before I got into the state, and just admiring and being happy about that part of myself, and celebrating that part of myself. And then just, sitting in that space was very, very uplifting, you know, because then I was focusing on admiring myself instead of what was bothering me. So I just wanted to share that because, you know, I think it's important for people to find as many ways as possible to pull themselves out of a state that's unhealthy. And I think that oftentimes it's always about something that's outside of self a lot of times. Sometimes people quite naturally will seek the attention and companionship and validation of others to help them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that, self-love and self-confidence um, can be very, very long lasting, when the person is able to cultivate that within themselves based off of how they feel about themselves, based off of self-admiration versus the admiration of others. Because what happens when people stop admiring that person, So, yes, that's what I wanted to share in this video. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully this information was beneficial to someone out there in these spiritual streets. Peace.